to say hello to everybody, including the 5 undercover agents from the NSA and the CIA that have sent some of their agents in here to really bother us. But let's just ignore them, all right? We are here to support Julian Assange and end this persecution of Julian Assange. It is a crime against humanity which is happening today on this International Human Rights Day. It's a crime against humanity what they are doing to Julian Assange for 4 years now. 4 years he has been incommunicado. What has he done? He is no threat to anybody except for those who are a threat to everybody, which means the U.S. government and the British government. They are a threat to everybody. Julian is a threat to nobody, and he's inside this dank, dark, rancid, squalid, medieval dungeon called Belmarsh. So we got to continue. We cannot sit on our laurels today. This is a better turnout than last year at this time, but we got to continue every single day. Tomorrow, what are we going to do? The next day, call, organize, have a rally, have a vigil, but we got to keep moving because we are facing incredible odds here. We are facing this and that and all of the other huge organizations, all of the MI6, MI5, CIA, NSA, all of these. We're fighting against them because they want him quiet. And we got to fight. We got to keep going, folks.
I bring you the solidarity greetings from Germany and Europe for this important action for press freedom today on the International Day of Human Rights. There has been a non-partisan, a cross-party parliamentary group in the German Bundestag in which parliamentarians for all parties participate with the aim of working for the freedom of Julian Assange and demanding from the German government political asylum for Julian in Germany. And the German Bundestag condemned the political persecution of Julian as an attack on press freedom and called the German government to work to secure his release from the British custody, as well as to end the extradition case to the United States. It was a vast majority of the German parliament supporting this resolution. This, my friends, is the task and the goal for the new year. It must become the year of Julian Assange is released and can return to his family and his children who miss him very much. Let's free Julian Assange. Thank you.
We're here to support Julian Assange and stand for him as a person, as a human being who is being abused and who is being tortured. And we're not going to go away. We're not going to stop. We're not going to give up. Everybody who is here today is going to continue the fight, is going to, whether it's on social media, whether it's talking to friends, making phone calls, we're going to continue the fight. There are the issues of justice, but there's the issues of a person who we all owe, who has enlightened us in so many ways. And we have to thank Julian Assange, the person, for that. But we also have to look at the issues at hand. Can the government interfere and intercept information between a lawyer and the client and then use that information to prosecute the lawyer? You have no justice system if that can happen. And we have to ensure that we stand up and fight against these types of injustices, because these can affect us all and will. Since we're standing up for Julian Assange, we can see the direction that this thing is going. So I want to thank everyone for coming out here today and remind everyone this is symbolic, this is great, everybody should see what we're doing, everybody should hear what we have to say, but when we leave, we must all keep up the fight. Thank you.
There are hundreds of people out there working for Assange, and that's something very new. And Assange would be happy for that, because if you ever go and visit him during this period, he says, "What are you doing for me?" And he says that because he's paralyzed. He can't do anything for himself. So what are we doing for him? We're doing a lot for him, and times have changed. And I want to say that COVID has helped us, because COVID has taught some of us who didn't know how to have conversations over Zoom or over a Signal, now can do that. And so we can meet across the country, and we can organize in 10 places at once, and that's really helped us. And the fight has to be carried out, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm telling you, the fight is not in the courtroom. I'm not opposed to having lawsuits brought, because that also brings attention to Julian. But really, the fight is in the street. And if we can get enough people doing enough things, we'll be victorious, and we'll free Julian. Thank you very much.
Free Julian Assange! Again! Free Julian Assange! Again! Free Julian Assange! Louder! Free Julian Assange! Beautiful. Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange!
Coming to Julian Assange, we have to understand that this journalist is being persecuted not just by the United States, but by Great Britain. Why? Because they want him crushed. I'm talking about Whitehall. They want Assange crushed as much as the United States does for revealing crimes of state. They took an active part in the operation to arrest Julian Assange from the Ecuador embassy in London. And how did they do that? Well, it was called Operation Pelican. And this is from Declassified UK's reporting in the last few days. The Home Office had 8 staff. The Cabinet Office had 7 staff working on the secret operation to arrest Julian Assange in April 2019. The Ministry of Justice, which runs the courts, they won't say if their staff was involved in this Operation Pelican. The Foreign Office at first refused to say if its premises were used for the operation. And they lied. A junior minister from the Foreign Office lied to Parliament, saying that they weren't involved, and now it's been revealed that yes, they had several officers working on this case from the Foreign Office. And so Ian Duncan, who was Foreign Minister for the Americas, for Europe and the Americas from 2016 to 2019, he ran this UK campaign to force Assange out of the embassy. As a minister in Parliament, he made his opposition to Assange very well known. He called Julian Assange a miserable little worm in a speech to the House of Commons. In his diaries, Duncan refers to, quote, the supposed human rights of Julian Assange. He admits in his book to arranging an article in the Daily Mail, a hit piece on Assange in the Mail, that was published the day after Julian was arrested. Duncan watched the UK police pulling Julian Assange out of that embassy from his operation room in the Foreign Office. He watched a live feed, and they were wearing ties, his team, and the ties were adorned with little pictures of pelicans for Operation Pelican. And they had a drink to celebrate the arrest of Julian Assange. Afterward, Theresa May, who was the Prime Minister at the time, announced to the House of Commons that he'd been arrested, and there was a loud cheer. I don't know if it only came from the Conservative backbenchers. It could have also been Labour. I wouldn't be surprised. Duncan, the next day, or a couple of days later, flew to Ecuador to thank President Lenin Moreno, the new government of Ecuador, that lifted the political asylum of Julian Assange. He thanked him and brought a beautiful porcelain plate from the Buckingham Palace gift shop. I just want to say that the independence of the British judiciary is at stake in this case. Assange waits a decision from the High Court on his application to appeal the extradition order, as well as aspects of the lower court ruling. The Lord Chief Justice Ian Burnett is the judge who will decide whether to accept that appeal. And guess what? Alan Duncan and Judge Burnett are good friends. They had lunch together. They went to their birthday parties. So we want to know, is this an independent judiciary in Britain? I'll tell you that it's clear that the image of British justice and justice itself is on the line in the case of Julian Assange. If he's extradited, the whole world will know the British role in this tragedy and this travesty. Thank you very much.
It's unbelievable, isn't it, that we have to be here? Can you hear me? Unbelievable that we have to be here to ask the Brits to do the right thing and free Julian Assange, who is probably the most persecuted political prisoner in the world today. I have the honor of being asked to introduce my friend Roger Waters. You know, obviously Roger is known for his music, his creative genius, and his inspirational leadership on human rights. And Roger, I want to salute you for what you do, because I like that military bearing. A lot of people don't know all the things that Roger does behind the scenes in this world for people to help them get through difficult situations, as I had, but also to more generally advance the cause of human rights. I love you so much, Roger, and get up here and tell us something about Julian.
Are you ready? Yeah! All right. We live in what may be the craziest city, in what is definitely the craziest country in a crazy fucking world. As the Big Apple goes into its completely crazy Christmas thing, I was just thinking, wouldn't it be great if the holidays were free of our attachments to competing deities or their disciples or prophets, and could simply be a seasonable expression of general thanks to no one in particular for the bounty that this beautiful planet bestows upon us poor sinners. And thank you, madam. I don't know, somebody chuckled, which is nice. And maybe even a celebration of our potential to look after one another. Paragraph. What's this got to do with Julian Assange, I hear you say? Well, actually, everything. Bear with me, I'll get there. Ever since the persecution of Julian Assange started in 2010, or whenever it was, I've been boiling with rage. Finally, someone was providing we the people with a hitherto absent public service, namely telling us the truth about what was really going on in the corridors of power and the theatres of war. The persecution has been going on for so long, it could have been hard to maintain our rage had not the smear campaign against Julian been enraging and diabolical and so constant. So the rage is still there, boiling away. But I'm going to digress and talk for a minute about hope. 5 years ago, in October 2017, during a tour of North America, I did a Q&A in Vancouver. It was a meeting to support the BDS movement. Thank you. And it was co-hosted by two charming ladies of different faiths. One, a Jewish lady, and one Muslim. We had a good talk. You can find it on YouTube if you're interested. Oh, fuck off, Keith. Sorry, that was a friend of mine. He texted me about football. I've told you not to text me about football, ever. Okay, sorry. We had a good talk. You can find it on YouTube if you're interested. Anyway, at the end, the Jewish lady asked me a final question. She was a little bit overcome, I have to say. She was a sweet, sweet woman. She said, "What gives you hope?" she said. Isn't the human heart a remarkable organ? Mine, in that moment, that evening in Vancouver 2017, took me back to a morning in New York City 15 years earlier, in 2002. I was with an old friend, a man called Etienne Vigil, a great French lyricist who I was working with on Sa Ira, an opera about the French Revolution. I will get there, I promise. We would stop for breakfast and sat in a patch of morning sun at a table on the sidewalk outside a bar on 54th Street. I had an espresso. Etienne had a famous grouse, a large one, and opened a packet of Benson and Hedges cigarettes. We chatted, the usual breakfast small talk, you know, the meaning of life, that sort of thing that Frenchmen do. Oh, sorry. Etienne took a few deep drags on his second or third Benson and did that thing Frenchmen do with their eyebrows raised and the corners of their mouths turned down. Hang on. Like that. He nodded. Ground out his cigarette in the ashtray, looked into my eyes and spoke. He said, I was here. Translated, that is, I was here. I felt. That's the expression. Something. And perhaps I was not alone. Think about it. That is what gives me hope. Perhaps we are not alone. And that brings me back to Julian Assange. Julian Assange reminds me that I am not alone. Because in fact, without Julian Assange, we might as well be alone. Without a free press, we might as well be alone. Without basic human rights for all our brothers and sisters all over the world, irrespective of their colour, religion or nationality, we might as well all be alone. That is why we are standing shoulder to shoulder outside the British Embassy in New York City alongside our brother Julian Assange. So Julian, thank you for standing up to the man on our behalf these last 10 years. You are not alone here today on 2nd Avenue, New York, and neither are we. We are many, and we have a message for Vanessa Bereza, that apology for a magistrate that sent you down in that kangaroo court in London. Miss Bereza, you are a disgrace to the legal profession. Fuck you. Sorry, guys. Sorry, I apologize. Sophia, quiet. When I spoke in London in Parliament Square back in February 2020, I wasted a few words on Boris Johnson, who was then the United States tame poodle, sorry, Sophia, Johnson, sorry, in Parliament. He ignored the law and did the bidding of his masters in Washington. Today, the current pitiful British poodle, Rishi Sunak, is equally well trained and biddable. Rishi, sit! Good boy. What about the law, Mr. Sunak? What about Magna Carta? What about basic human rights, Mr. Sunak? You're fucking wolf, Rishi. Paragraph. Okay, last week there was a glimmer of light from the mainstream media. The New York Times, Le Monde, the Guardian, Der Spiegel and El País published an open letter in support of dropping some of the charges against Julian. Welcome to the party, guys! Where the fuck have you been all these years? All these years when your colleague, Julian Assange, needed you. Where were all your editorials exhorting the people to take to the streets in their millions before the dungeon doors slammed shut on free speech forever? I sincerely hope your half-assed letter is not just a whimper to cover your own sorry asses. I hope so. We shall see. There are others here to... I've nearly finished. There are others here to speak. So in conclusion, I'll just remind all interested parties, especially the executive branch of the government of the United States of America, Joe Biden et al., and also all members of Congress, to some advice my mother gave to me when I was just a young teenager. She said, "Roger, you will have many important decisions to make during your lifetime. When you do, I advise you to, above all, do your research thoroughly. Do all the reading, listen to all opinions, especially opinions that differ from your own. If you are thorough and turn over every rock, you will have done all the heavy lifting. The next bit of the process is easy." So what's the easy bit, Mum? You just do the right thing. So Joe, come on, brother. For once in your fucking life, do the right thing! Free Julian Assange! Thank you very much. That's all I have to say on the subject. Don't forget to feed the dog.
Thank you. Thank you for the sweater, by the way.
No, it's cool. All right. Thanks a lot. Love you.
Give him room.
Julian Assange has been held in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement. 23 hours a day, every day. That's over 1,000 days of solitary confinement in a solid-celled wall smaller than a horse stable. That is torture. The UN says it's torture. The World Health Organization says it's torture. And according to the National Commission on Correctional Health Care, solitary confinement greater than 15 days is torture. Assange is being punished, and the state of New York recognizes that solitary confinement over 15 days is torture, and they've banned it. It's not allowed in this state. He's being punished, and he hasn't even been convicted of anything. Innocent until proven guilty, my ass. You know, there was another extradition case in England not too long ago. It was General Pinochet, who was accused of committing war crimes. And he got to stay in a mansion under house arrest with an ankle bracelet. Julian Assange is in England awaiting extradition on a charge of exposing war crimes, and he's in solitary. We know what's going on here. This ordeal has lasted over 10 years, and our government is happy to stretch it out, because what they're really about is making the threat to any journalist anywhere in the world that if you print information, truthful information, that the U.S. government doesn't want out there, they will persecute you and make your life miserable. So we're here to have Julian's back, because he did this for us. Sacrificed his freedom, his body, his mental health, to tell us what our government has been doing in our name and with our money. Julian Assange wasn't supposed to be a hero. He is a publisher who published truthful information.
in a country that believes in freedom of the press, that's not supposed to be a heroic act. It hurt nobody except the people whose corruption he exposed. But he's a threat to our militarized economy, the military-industrial congressional complex. That cabal has started or continued wars in the last 20 years based on lies at a cost of $8 trillion and 900,000 deaths. Julian Assange exposed the lies that drew us into those wars, the lies that justified continuing them, and the war crimes they lied about. Assange is right. If wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth. That is what motivates him. Truth. That's what the military-industrial congressional complex is deathly afraid of. There are so many outrages in the world today. There are so many injustices. We are overwhelmed. We can't fight them all. How do we decide which outrage to take a stand on? Freedom of the press is the foundation. We will never even find out about all the other injustices if the press is muzzled. At a speech on the occasion of World Press Freedom Day, President Biden proclaimed, "At least 360 people worldwide are currently imprisoned for their work in journalism. We all stand in solidarity with these journalists." Biden neglected to mention that one of those was Julian Assange. The reality is that President Biden stands in opposition to Barack Obama's decision not to prosecute Assange, and instead is continuing Trump's war on the press. It was Harry Truman who said, "Once a government commits to the principle of silencing opposition, it has only one way to go, and that's down the path of increasingly repressive measures until it becomes a source of terror for all its citizens." And it was Julian Assange who said, "We embarked on a mission to bring the First Amendment to the world. Little did we realize that our greatest challenge would come as we tried to bring the First Amendment to the United States." There's something else that Julian said. "Every time we witness an injustice and do not act, we train our character to be passive in its presence, and thereby eventually lose all ability to defend ourselves and those we love. So we are acting. We will not be passive in the face of this injustice. We will not give up this fight for freedom of the press, for our democracy, for Julian Assange."
Would you please welcome Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone?
Thank you, Randy. Yeah, thank you, Randy. Can't thank you enough. You're a soldier. I will speak louder. I'll speak louder. I was hearing some babbling around the outskirts. I don't know. Was President Biden here? Everyone's trying to take my coffee. Yeah, I'm glad everyone stayed after Roger Waters and Ben Cohen for the little people. Just a humble editor of a website that was just declared by Wikipedia to be far left and far right at the same time. We'll talk about that in a second because it does relate. I came in last night, had dinner with an old friend, a not political friend, and he brought his apolitical girlfriend who brought her apolitical corporate friends. Very nice people. I mean, great people. And after 2 hours of talking about themselves, they asked me what I was doing in New York. And I said, I'm speaking at a rally for Julian Assange. And they just drew a blank. They said, who the hell is Julian? Julian Lennon? Julian who? Julius Irving? They didn't know who Julian Assange was. And these are people that are highly educated. And they have been betrayed. No, it's not their fault. And when I told them who Julian Assange was, and that he is being literally tortured and has been in solitary confinement for 1,000 days and more for exposing official corruption and the crimes of our national security state, they were horrified, and you could actually see tears in their eyes when they learned that he was also a father and a husband who has been deprived of holding his children simply because he told the truth about our national security state. We have an entire population to reach here. Most people do not know who Julian Assange is, and that's why this work is so important. Now I'll tell you about another event I went to earlier this year in Los Angeles. Some of you might not like it from the lockdown left, but it was at a rally to defeat the mandates. Yeah. Those of you who don't like it, it's irrelevant. We all need to get along. We need to get over these divisions from the pandemic. And I'm sorry you got mad at me, but I'm not mad at you. I'm sorry you fell for the psyop. But I was just there. I was just there to explain how I thought that the lockdowns and the health passports were creating a digital dystopia. And when I said that Julian Assange had warned about this for years, before I even called for his freedom, this right-leaning crowd got on its feet and cheered immediately for the freedom of Julian Assange. And it was an amazing moment. Now why? Why? Because they watch stuff like Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson has had Roger Waters on repeatedly to advocate for Julian Assange. It's crazy. We're living in an upside-down world right now where the Fox News network that was clamoring for the war in Iraq is now presenting space for people to advocate for the freedom of Julian Assange. And so there's an opportunity there. Randy really wants my coffee. But who are the people that we have the hardest time trying to talk to about this? It's the progressives, the liberals, the MSNBC watchers, the people who read legacy media. We call them shitlibs now, but these are educated people who read the New York Times and the Washington Post, and they don't realize the Washington Post is owned by one of the world's richest men who is a contractor for the CIA, who hosts the CIA's cloud at his Amazon. They don't realize that, and they are hostile to Julian Assange. So, the people who support the Patriot Act. So that the mainstream media has become an enemy of the journalist, the most courageous publisher and journalist of our time. And I always tell this story. I always tell this story about the piece that I published that Randy mentioned at the Gray Zone about how the CIA was running an operation to surveil Julian Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy. They had taken over the security through UC Global, and so everyone who came in through the front door to visit Julian, they thought they were speaking to an Ecuadorian security guard. It was in fact a CIA asset who would take their devices, open their devices, invade their devices, and then send it back to Langley. So who were some of those people? Some of those people were reporters for these same publications that have demonized Julian Assange, painting him as a Russian spy and so on. One of them was Ellen Nakashima, the chief national security correspondent for the Washington Post. I published photos of her devices that were opened by CIA assets at UC Global. Just to restate that, the chief national security correspondent for the Washington Post had her devices infiltrated by the CIA. Now, can you imagine if the Russian FSB did that? What would have happened? There would have been headlines on every mainstream publication. I went to the Washington Post. I went to Ellen Nakashima. I said, do you have any comment on this? Do you have anything to say about this? No. Silence. Crickets. Not a goddamn thing, because they can't bite the hand that feeds them. They are coward. No, they're worse than cowards. They are the voice of the national security state that Julian Assange exposed. They are the stenographers for our secret government, and they betrayed Julian Assange. So a letter recently came out. Thank you to the New York Times publisher Arthur Sulzberger for participating in this letter. Several mainstream legacy publications called for the U.S. to drop the Espionage Act charges against Julian Assange. Finally, years later, they finally did this. The New York Times was the only American publication to sign that letter. No LA Times, no Chicago Tribune, no Washington Post, no Wall Street Journal, no Associated Press, no Reuters, because they are the stenographers for the national security state. They are worse than cowards. They are part of the crimes that Julian Assange exposed. Julian Assange asked, what is the average death count for every Western journalist? And that is a question we need to continue to ask today. Those people know that they will never be on the hook. They will never face punishment, as Julian Assange did, because they will never do what he did. But those of us who do, and we do this at the Gray Zone, if you read anything Kit Clarenberg published recently about the British national security state, British intelligence, we continue to do this. There is a target on our back because of what is happening to Julian Assange. And so we are fighting not only for the right of Julian Assange to hold his children and be with his wife, we're fighting for the right to expose the secret government, the national security state, the Central Intelligence Agency, which has a $90 billion or more black budget, which has infested Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms with its former agents. And we see Garland Nixon here is banned from Twitter. I thought Elon Musk was exposing censorship. National security state contractor Elon Musk, I thought he was exposing censorship. He said only the right is censored. Well, why are anti-imperialists like Garland Nixon censored? Why are they suspended? Why? Why isn't he leaking the files about that? Why isn't he leaking the files about Russiagate? Why isn't he leaking the files about everyone who criticized the Ukraine proxy war being suspended? Why has Elon Musk not restored the Twitter account of Julian Assange? Can we at least free Julian Assange's Twitter account? Huh? So I want to close by reading an email from Julian Assange. Hi all, I'm in Iceland. You should be too, or at least reporting about it. I've been in Iceland the past few weeks advising parliamentarians here on a cross-party proposal to turn Iceland into an international journalism haven, a jurisdiction designed to attract organizations into publishing online from Iceland by adopting the strongest press and source protection laws from around the world. In my role as WikiLeaks editor, I've been involved in fighting off many legal attacks. To do that and keep our sources safe, we have had to spread assets, encrypt everything, and move telecommunications and people around the world to activate protective laws in national jurisdictions. It goes on, but he says, that's why I'm excited about what is happening in Iceland, which has started to see the world in a new way after its mini revolution a year ago. That was February 2010, and today Julian Assange has been captured. And he was captured because he was, and he's being tortured because he was leading a revolution in journalism. And that's why. Not because he violated some Espionage Act. So it's our job today to continue that revolution, to continue the revolution that Julian Assange and WikiLeaks started, and to see Julian Assange standing here with us and his family to see that revolution through. Thank you.
I was sitting in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, like year after, 2 years and 2 months, or I could even get a trial, and like the New York Times wouldn't cover the fact that there was an American human rights lawyer in detention, put there by a private Chevron prosecutor, not even by the US government. And it was people like Katie and Max and Marianne Williamson and all of these independent journalists who were able to get the narrative, the truthful narrative of what had happened out there when the mainstream media almost completely ignored it. So I love you. And beyond that, I got familiar with her great podcast and all her journalism, and it's not only is it like brilliant and incisive, it's totally entertaining. Get up here. Katie Halper.
Okay, so we got one political prisoner out. Now we've got one political prisoner out. We have a couple more to take care of. Leonard Peltier, for example, and of course, Julian Assange.
Mumia!
And Mumia, free Mumia, yes. By the way, my fan is out here. Want to thank him for amplifying my voice. That's the guy yelling about some of us. Can we do a prison swap between him and Julian? Maybe exchange them? Swap? Yeah, or John Bolton. Yeah, I kid, because unlike Biden and Trump, I don't actually believe in imprisoning people for their ideas. So keep going, my friend. You're my biggest hype man. But, you know, it is really wonderful to be here with all these speakers. We need to come up with a Ben & Jerry's flavor for Julian Assange. Maybe that'll get his name into the discourse. The taste of freedom, chock full of truth or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Liberty on ice. That doesn't have a great ring to it, but it's basically what's happening right now.
Get close to the microphone.
Okay, so really quickly, I just want to say it's really surprising that Joe Biden isn't freeing Julian Assange, because you'd think that he would understand. He himself having been, of course, locked up for visiting Nelson Mandela in South Africa, right? You'd think that he'd get it from his days, just like Julian Assange is deprived of sunlight. Joe Biden knows that feeling very well from toiling in the mine shafts, how he spent his youth, and his fathers before him did as well, apparently. Also, you'd think that he would resonate with Julian Assange because, of course, Julian Assange refuses to stand down. He takes on power, state power, corporate power, refuses to back down. And Joe Biden, of course, refuses to back down in the face of Corn Pop, a really bad dude who he met when he was a civil rights activist, by which he meant literally working as a lifeguard at a pool where some black people would swim, which is, if that's not a white savior complex, then I don't know what is. But really, this is a terrible moment. This is a terrible stain on our history, which is already very stained. It's pretty despicable it took this long for these publications, which worked with WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, to say that maybe he shouldn't be killed for the crime of journalism. I'm glad they did it, but it's too little too late. They already have blood on their hands. And it's really not that hard to be on the right side of this issue. This has nothing to do with 2016. People had their brains broken by Trump, but if anyone you know is a liberal, just ask them why they don't believe in the First Amendment, why they don't believe in free speech. Remind them that they were so rightfully upset by Trump's attacks on the Fourth Estate. They should be upset by anyone's attacks on the Fourth Estate. Also remind them that Obama, because a lot of these people like Obama, which whatever, but a lot of them do, remind them that Obama was a little bit restrained in going after Assange because of the quote-unquote New York Times problem, right? He got that if he went after Julian Assange, he'd have to go after the New York Times. So this is what we need to remind people to do. If your friends are liberal, tell them to side with Obama over Trump. Tell them that Joe Biden needs to do the right thing and free Julian Assange. Thank you. Thank you.
Where are you going? Stand over here. Free Julian Assange! Yeah. Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! My friends, Randy, thank you for that introduction. Thank you everyone who's organized today. My friends, we meet today as the world stares into the abyss of nuclear winter. That long freeze that follows the raging fire of humanity's last war. A new ice age of our own making, where the ash of humanity blots out the sun, where the oceans freeze and the crops perish, where the lights flicker and fade, where famine and plague kill all who survived the blasts. The sudden extinction of almost all life on Earth. A cold and dead world
all that remains of a once lush oasis in the vast emptiness of space. Free Assange! Free Assange! Free Assange! Free Assange! Free Assange! Free Assange! Free Assange, because we stand on the edge of that future. And fearless independent journalists like Julian Assange are the only ones who stand in the way. People like Garland Nixon, Max Blumenthal, independent journalists are the only ones arming us with the truth to avoid that future. My friends, we meet as a new global aristocracy of ultra-billionaires extends their control into every aspect of our life. A high-tech dystopia where every move is tracked, every device surveilled, where police protect the ruling class with military weapons and killer robots, where superviruses that could wipe out humanity are engineered in labs around the world. This dystopian future that only science fiction writers and artists truly predicted. Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, William Gibson, Roger Waters. A world where freedom and autonomy are stripped, where our civil liberties and medical freedom are extinguished, where our right to strike against the corporate masters is taken away.
That's right.
Free Assange!
Free Assange!
Free Assange!
Free Assange!
Free Assange!
Free Assange!
Free Assange, because truth tellers like him are the only ones who can arm us with the information to fight back. But most of all, free Julian Assange, because he's an innocent man with a great heart. Because his compassion spans the world and has touched millions of lives, including every one of us here. Free Julian because he exemplifies the courage that every one of us will have to show if humanity is to survive. And free Julian because his family is waiting for him. Stella, Gabriel, John, his 2 young boys, because Julian belongs back in their arms. Thank you, Randy, Chuck, everyone from Assange Countdown to Freedom, everyone from NYC, Free Assange, who organized this today. You all give the world hope.
All right, thank you. Powerful speech. Now go up out there and quiet that guy that doesn't like you or Katie, all right? Now he hates me. Right from Broadway are the Raging Grannies. I guess if you can all hug that same microphone, or just sing a cappella.
It's this one. I'll hold it.
Okay, that's good. Can you hear us all right? Okay, we're going to sing Julian's anthem. Anthem to My Country 'Tis of Thee. Ready? Ready? Our country isn't free. Where's our humanity? We protest now. Julian Assange was right, brought secret files to light. He's locked up and tortured day and night. Why is this allowed? Our Julian is so bold, thinks that truth should be told. Is this a crime? Why not let Julian show where our tax dollars go? When we pay for war crimes, we should know. Why is he serving time? Editor, publisher, WikiLeaks founder, imprisoned and sick. U.S. don't extradite. Time now to do what's right. For press freedom now we all must fight. Free Julian, make it quick.
All right. Now, Now, I was in D.C. for about 4 months there with this truck, trying to get people to pass out flyers with me, and it was difficult. Very difficult to get people out there on the street to pass out flyers, which is something we've got to do. It's not just today, tomorrow. Get into a subway here in New York City. This is a very critical moment for Assange, because once he's here, he's not getting out. So right now, everyone's got to redouble their efforts, mobilize, and get out there on the streets. It's very serious right now.
Free Julian Assange! Again! Free Julian Assange! Again! Free Julian Assange! Again! Free Julian Assange! Louder!
Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! Thank you.
Yeah.